In the Namib Desert, a spider is being hunted. A parasitic wasp has locked onto it. If the wasp lands, the spider dies slowly from the inside, so the spider does the only thing left. It tucks its legs, throws itself sideways, and cartwheels down the face of the dune, spinning faster than the wasp can follow. That spider is the closest any animal has ever come to a wheel. And even then, it isn't a wheel. The whole body is rolling. There is no axle. When it reaches the bottom, it stands up and walks away like everything else. That gap is the entire story. Roughly 4 billion years of life on this planet, every body plan evolution has ever tried, and not one animal has grown a wheel. Not a near miss. A flat zero. Eyes evolved independently something like 40 times, powered flight at least 4 times. Rolling itself keeps getting reinvented pangolins, woodlice, certain caterpillars. Getting a body to go round and round is not the hard part. The hard part is the axle. One piece that spins freely while the rest of the animal stays put. Now turn your hand palm up and keep turning it in the same direction. Somewhere around half a turn, something stops you. Bone and ligament in your case, but the ceiling is the same in every living joint on Earth. Nothing goes all the way around and keeps going. The reason is plumbing. Nerves and blood vessels behave exactly like the cable on a pair of headphones. Twist them far enough, and they tangle. Twist them further, and they tear. Anything connecting a living body to a spinning wheel becomes a leash, and a leash caps you at less than 1 full turn. The wheel has to be genuinely detached, sitting in a socket, touching the body, joined by nothing at all. Even a fraction of that freedom is expensive. An owl can turn its head about 270 degrees, and to survive it needed completely rebuilt anatomy. Wider bony canals so the arteries have slack. Reservoirs that pool blood so the brain doesn't black out while the neck is wrung sideways. That is the engineering bill for 3/4 of a single turn. A wheel has to do it forever. And once you somehow solve the plumbing, the wheel itself is dead tissue. Hair is dead, but it is continuously pushed out of a living follicle. Nails slide off a living bed. Enamel sits on a tooth that still has blood and nerve. A wheel has no root. The moment it starts to wear, and it will, because it is the only part permanently grinding against the ground, nothing in biology can resurface it. It also cannot grow. A juvenile is stuck with juvenile wheels for life. Biology did build rotary motors, of course. Bacterial flagella spin hundreds of times a second and can reverse. Inside every one of your cells right now, the machinery that turns food into usable energy runs on a shaft spinning more than 100 times a second. So the wheel is not impossible. The size is. Bacterial scale, diffusion is fast enough that a molecule can cross the whole cell in half a millisecond with no pumps at all. Scale that up 1,000 times, and the same molecule needs minutes. Scale it to a meter, and it needs decades. That is why you have a heart and a circulatory system. Above a certain size, every part has to be wired into a delivery network. A bacterial motor sits in the soup and draws power straight from the membrane. The reason no animal your size has a wheel is the same reason you have blood. Even if some lineage somehow solved every biological problem living socket, renewable hard rim, continuous rotation that never tears its own supply lines, the wheel would still lose. A wheel by itself is only half a machine. The other half is the ground. And the ground has never cooperated. Take that identical wheel off the rail and roll it across soft sand, wet mud, loose scree, or a forest floor thick with roots and leaf litter, and the picture changes completely. The wheel digs in. It sinks. Rolling resistance skyrockets. Traction disappears. Momentum dies. Nothing about the wheel changed. The surface did. That is the decisive half of the machine. A leg works differently. It does not accept the ground as a continuous ribbon that must be smooth and firm for the entire journey. A leg chooses. It plants, tests, shifts weight, steps over or around. It can lengthen or shorten its stride, change angle, or briefly become a prop while the body pivots. The contact is discrete and selective. A wheel's contact is continuous and total. Whatever the ground is at that exact moment, soft, hard, wet, dry, sloping, rutted, the wheel has to take all of it, all the time. For 4 billion years, the ground almost never arrived as pavement. Early continents were covered in microbial mats, then thick vegetation. then the chaotic debris of forests, swamps, floodplains, and glacial till. Most of Earth's surface has always been soft, uneven, or both. Even the open grasslands that eventually appeared still contained holes, soft patches after rain, and obstacles. A free-spinning disc has no answer for any of that. It either digs a trench or stops. This is why the oldest engineered trackways we can date were built for feet, not wheels. The Sweet Track in the Somerset Levels, laid down around 3807 BC, is a narrow plank walkway across marsh. It was designed so human feet and the occasional domestic animal could cross soft ground without sinking. The people who built it already understood that the surface itself had to be prepared. They did not invent a better foot. They invented a temporary road. That is the real breakthrough the wheel depends on. And it arrived late. Look at the environments early humans actually lived in. Paleolithic landscapes were rarely flat and firm for long distances. Hunter-gatherers moved through woodlands, river valleys, rocky uplands, and seasonal wetlands. A wheeled vehicle would have been useless in most of those settings, and a liability in the rest, heavy, fragile, and unable to leave a prepared path. Even after agriculture began, and people stayed in one place longer, the first roads were still footpaths and animal tracks. Only when societies accumulated enough surplus labor and political coordination to build and maintain hard surfaces over meaningful distances did the wheel become practical. That dual requirement is what sealed the outcome. You do not just need the mechanical invention of an axle and rim. You also need a second, entirely separate invention. A continuous, load-bearing surface that matches the wheel. One without the other is almost worthless. Evolution cannot hold the two ideas in mind and wait for both to appear. Cultural evolution can, but only slowly, and only after the social and economic conditions make the second half affordable. That is why boats and art appear tens of thousands of years before the wheel. A boat works the moment it floats. A painted image works the moment someone looks at it. A wheel does not work until the ground has been engineered to accept it. Modern experience confirms the same limit. Off-road vehicles still need wide tires, low pressure, or tracks precisely because ordinary wheels fail the moment the surface turns soft or broken. Even today, the places where wheels dominate are the places we have spent enormous energy flattening and hardening. The rest of the planet still favors legs, or something that can choose its contact points. So, the wheel remains a peak with sheer sides. Solving the biology would only have gotten an animal to the base of the cliff. The ground itself forms the rest of the barrier, and for most of Earth's history, that barrier was absolute. Legs climbed it one useful step at a time. Wheels never got the chance. That leaves the deepest problem of all. Evolution can only walk uphill. Every step from one generation to the next has to be an improvement on the step before it, or it disappears. There is no memory of the destination, and no way to accept a temporary loss for a later payoff. A light-sensitive patch of skin is useful the day it appears. A slightly better patch is slightly more useful. A partial wheel is not a slightly worse wheel. It is a lump that costs energy to grow, catches on everything, and moves the animal precisely nowhere. The animal carrying it is worse off than its cousins, so it loses. Sewall Wright mapped this in 1932 as an adaptive landscape fitness peaks separated by valleys. Richard Dawkins later called the same idea climbing Mount Improbable. You can reach an impossible-looking summit only if there is a gentle path up the back. The wheel is a peak with sheer cliffs on every side. Even a brain that can plan still struggles with it. Humans were painting cave walls and crossing open ocean tens of thousands of years ago. The wheeled vehicle does not appear until around 3500 BC. Art and boats both arrived first. We can imagine things that do not yet exist, yet the combination of axle, free-spinning disc, load-bearing platform, and prepared surface still took an extraordinarily long time. Once you see the shape of that gap, other absences start to line up. No organism ever made fire. Nothing alive has ever smelted metal. In 4 billion years, nothing has evolved a radio. They look like a random list until you notice what they share. Each one only becomes useful once several separately useless pieces are all present at the same time. Half a fire is nothing. A partially smelted rock is still a rock. That is the signature of a process that cannot look ahead. So the absence of the wheel is not a hole in nature's toolkit. It is a fingerprint left by the only kind of maker this planet has ever known, something that works blind, one small improvement at a time, and still manage to produce the eye, the wing, the rotary motor inside your cells, and the brain that is thinking about this right now. That fingerprint tells us more about the nature of the process than any list of inventions ever could. Evolution does not sketch a final design and then reverse engineer the steps. It has no sketch. It has only the present generation, the slight variations that appear, and the immediate test of whether those variations help or hurt survival and reproduction right now. Anything that requires several non-functional intermediate stages to exist at the same time is invisible to it. The wheel is one of those things. So are fire, metallurgy, and radio. Each of them only becomes useful once a cluster of separate pieces is already in place. Evolution cannot hold the unfinished cluster in reserve. It has no place to store a half-built idea. This is why the successful complex structures all share a different signature. The eye can begin as a simple, light-sensitive patch. That patch is already better than nothing. A slight cupping improves directionality. A crude lens improves focus. Each step pays for itself on the day it appears. The wing can begin as a surface that helps an animal leap a little farther or fall a little slower. Each incremental change in area or stiffness delivers a measurable advantage. The rotary motors inside bacteria and inside our own mitochondria work at molecular scale, where the physics of diffusion and membrane potential already supply everything needed. No long supply lines, no dead tissue that must renew itself while spinning under load. These things have gentle slopes leading up to them. The wheel does not. Even human culture, which can plan, still carries the same constraint in diluted form. We can imagine the finished object, yet the historical record shows how long it still takes when multiple independent conditions must align. Art appears tens of thousands of years before the wheel. Boats appear earlier too. The cognitive ability was present. The missing piece was the combination of mechanical insight and a prepared surface that made the insight practical. Cultural evolution is faster than genetic evolution, but it is still cumulative and still limited by what is useful at each stage. A society that cannot yet maintain roads has little use for a cart. A society that has never seen continuous rotation under load has little reason to invent the axle. The fingerprint, then, is not simply the missing wheel. It is the pattern of what is present and what is absent across the entire history of life and the early history of human technology. Complex things that can be assembled in functional stages appear again and again. Complex things that cannot be assembled that way remain missing until a different kind of process, deliberate human engineering, finally steps in. That pattern is the evidence. It shows us the kind of maker we are dealing with, one that never sees the mountain, only the next foothold. And that same pattern becomes a prediction. If life exists elsewhere and was assembled by the same blind, stepwise process, it will carry the same fingerprint. It will solve movement with legs, fins, undulating bodies, or cilia structures that work when they are only half finished. It will not solve it with wheels. Somewhere out there, something is crossing a plane right now, and the odds are overwhelming that it is walking. That is why ancient humans, for all their intelligence, for all the art and boats and trackways they built, still spent most of their history without the wheel. The invention was never just a clever idea. It was a mountain with no gentle slope, and evolution and early human culture could only climb what it could see one step at a time.